Contact at point 003.
Welcome to Live Action Star Wars. I'm James.
I'm Ralph.
And today we are going back to the movies. For the first time in quite a while, we are going to talk about one of the Star Wars films. It is The Force Awakens from 2015. The first of the Disney era.
Right. And we're not doing it alone. Nope. We're being joined by a professor of Star Wars. An all-around swell guy, Christopher Irving. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Definitely our most scholarly guest that we've ever had on.
Yeah, but maybe one of your messiest. So full disclosure.
I don't know.
When you have a 6-year-old boy and all of the cool toys are in your office, utter carnage happens. Like I shouldn't be showing you guys, but this is what happened. All of the Transformers just wrecked. But anyways, so apologies in advance, guys.
Toys are meant to be played with, always.
Damn straight.
Yeah,
he plays with like all my vintage Star Wars. Like, you know, as I showed you guys, we restored the Millennium Falcon during the pandemic. Took it apart, washed it.
Amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, how do you let your little kid play it? I'm like, no. You teach them to take good care of your old shit, which was made for kids. Begin with. People forget that, and they're responsible with toys when they're old enough. So
they'll fall in love with the toy and they won't want to break it and just smash it around. Like, yeah, absolutely, completely agree. That was my process, because I was born in '87, so I inherited all my older brother and sister's vintage stuff. So I was 6 years old when I was playing with all of those.
Wow.
So yeah, like I get that feeling.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I've told this story before, but I was born in '77 and I got hand-me-downs. So I had a snowspeeder with a pilot Luke, and then the only other action figure I had Star Wars wise to fit in the co-pilot seat in the back in Dak's position was the Emperor mail-away figure, which did not fit. Which did not fit.
Those legs aren't going in there.
Yeah,
so
no.
Luke,
that's crazy.
It was Luke flying on his own, shooting at the Emperor was my...
That's kind of badass, though.
I mean, that was your episode 7, surely.
Yeah.
Somehow you returned, and then you just, snowspeeders are cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I have a question. This is kind of, I'm so glad you're here, because you've taught in the short time that I got this new information, because I've known you I've been following you for a couple years based on...
Many Bothan's spies died for that information, by the way.
Because you produce action figures that I love. I didn't know that you were a professor of Star Wars, that you did 2 courses in Star Wars. And one of them you mentioned is the influences that helped George Lucas create Star Wars in 1977.
Yeah.
Now, here comes The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars is this thing that George Lucas created, and there's shades of Flash Gordon, Wizard of Oz, Kurosawa, The Hidden Fortress, all of these things.
Yeah.
Cut to 2015, and J.J. Abrams' influence is Star Wars. It's like none of that stuff.
Yeah.
And watching it yesterday, I don't know if it's been just the Star Wars fatigue or whatever, a whole lot of the magic of The Force Awakens is now gone for me.
Yeah.
You talk about, I don't know, just George Lucas and influence, and then now this new Disney era where the influence is just Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it. So my 2 classes, Star Wars Decoded, is about all of the influences leading up to episode 4. We do fit episode 5 in there as well, because Empire Strikes Back is a masterpiece, and
Yeah.
you've got like my students haven't seen Star Wars on the big screen because they're 19, 20. They're Clone Wars kids, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then Star Wars Effect picks up with Return of the Jedi, and it follows the rise of digital. And we don't get into the sequels at all. We talk about the prequels. We talk about the cartoons. But the thing is, George Lucas started as an experimental filmmaker, and he continued to be an experimental filmmaker even through the prequels. Won't let anyone shit on the prequels because he was pushing his film. He, like we can have like against you because of the things that Lucas accomplished with the prequels, but they were experimental films. He was experimenting how he produced them, how he put them together. But beyond that, they were about something. Episodes 1 through 6 are about history. They're based in history, whether it's Richard Nixon and Watergate, whether it's World War II. There's an historical basis for everything. And so he kind of, that was the kind of framework he hung everything on. Episode 7 is about, like you said, it's about Star Wars. And it's why like people are going nuts over Andor. Andor is about history. It's about the rise of fascism, right? Which I think is even more relevant in the age of Donald Trump, because there have been, I'm teaching World War II in my other class, VisCom. We're doing a World War II section. And the parallels, regardless of your political affiliation, are eerie. Richard Nixon was the basis for Palpatine. Like he said that.
In the original trilogy, or like across,
all of them, but then keep in mind, episode 3 came out during the War on Terror.
You can see it, especially in I think 2 and 3 in particular, like the things he had his plan for the prequel trilogy, but like after 9/11 stuff changed, I think in his mind, and everyone
you're with us or against us, right? So the thing with episode 7 is I feel like a lot of it was a reaction against the prequels because people were bitching about the prequels, like
from the first line.
Gen Xers are like, oh, it doesn't feel like, it's like, dude, you're not 6 years old anymore. Like, of course it's not. And it's not for you. He's making them for the next generation. And because of that, we have a bunch of 19 to 20-year-olds who love the prequels. But I mean, it's, what it makes me think of? It's like a tribute cover album, episode 7 is. Where they do like kind of tribute songs, but they don't really know what the songs are about to begin with. And so like I'll put it this way.
They're good. It's a good version of the song, but it doesn't have the same meaning as the song. Is the way I sort of see it.
They don't know what it's about. I mean, it's like, what is episode 7 really about? What are the Resistance? Who can tell me what the Resistance are?
That's the
Resistance is tough.
Does Princess Leia have a private secret militia? What the fuck? Like, would she?
Right.
What is it? What is the Resistance? What is the First Order?
It's the thing that I think it happened a lot with the sequels, because they're the most recent, so there isn't as much stuff in between. With the prequels, a lot of people sort of go back and sort of say the Clone Wars, quote unquote, fixed the prequels. They did so much to elevate some of the themes and stuff, because it was stuff that they didn't have enough room to do in those 3 movies. In the sequel trilogy, you're getting a lot of that in books and comics. I think books in particular. But it's like, if you're gonna just make a film series, it should be on screen. It should be there, and then the ancillary material should be exactly that. It should be.
Well, you know what? I agree with you, and I think a lot of the ancillary transmedia material was just to try and cover up their poor storytelling, because the prequels, you can still watch the prequels and know what's going on. Lucas has a great handling of backstory. Episode 4, and I tell this often to my students, and Ralph, I'm sure you can relate here because we're both like kind of the OG generation, is and you would probably remember this too as well, James, but like the Clone Wars was a line in episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can watch episode 4, and as a kid, you
Before
get
the Clone
okay.
Wars,
These are good guys. These are bad guys. They weren't dependent. It wasn't dependent on all of the ideas he had for 1 through 3. But also, as an adult, you can watch it and you can kind of see a little bit more. Like, if you listen to a line of dialogue, oh, this is the moment that the old republic is gone. So, like, this is a fascist government at play. And so you can kind of pick up on those things. It's because George Lucas at least had enough of a plan to know how to convey backstory. But the story wasn't dependent on that. Now, in the case of episode, so this is the way I describe episode 9. I'm going to get ahead a little bit. I had 3 wisdom teeth extracted the week before.
Oh no!
And I tell people regularly, and my poor students have heard this. My partner has heard it. I would prefer the pain of local anesthetic with 3 wisdom teeth in my early 40s to sitting through that fucking movie again, because it was like the epitome of like the corporate, like, kind of focus group, like, you know, and it was like a soulless piece of shit. Like, there's just nothing about that movie. If anything works, it's Kylo Ren, and that's because Adam Driver's like legendary.
He's got it right.
It was so dumb. It was so bad. It was like, it was incompetent and ineffectual as a story. And I think the problem with episode 7 is they didn't think, what is this about? What is the story? And how can we make it a competent story? Case in point, they were a little too on the nose for the First Order being not space Nazis. Like, it's kind of like you go for that when you can't think of like a smarter way to kind of create this archetype. But even then, what's their plan? Okay, we're going to take a planet and we're going to turn it into a big fucking cannon.
Yeah.
And it's going to have a limited range. So we can't do anything with it. Like, we can only blow up like planets in like this vicinity.
Yeah, it can't move.
It can't move.
Yeah.
And it pulls energy from a star, which may or may not make it go supernova. Who knows?
I was going to say, and then you're surely limited by the amount of power that you can draw from that star, because eventually it will run out. So yeah.
But then it's like, we're going to give it the exact same flaw the Death Star had. Oh, we're going to shield it better. It'll be big enough for fighters. We've lost 2 Death Stars. Like, and where did they get the money? There's nothing about it that makes any sense. You know, other than we want to do another Death Star. It's a very kind of Republican idea, like, oh, we're going to do it, but bigger.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast.
Do it bigger next time. Like,
I was listening to a podcast that said that it would probably be more interesting if the Republic created Starkiller Base. And it was taken over by
it had been
like a fascist regime.
Yeah, it had been in the works. Like, I don't know, they'd been demilitarized, but they were like, "Hey, the Empire started this project, but it was abandoned. Let's go in and finish it off." It's kind of like a Jurassic Parky sort of feel to that. I feel like,
but
building on the work of other people. Yeah,
but even then, I mean, it still doesn't make sense, you know. But we don't even know what the New Republic is, because they want to avoid politics. And so if you do Star Wars devoid of any political background or anything like that, then you're going to get episodes 7 through 9. Like, it's not, you know, Lucas has said in the really excellent Star Wars archives, all the movies are about symbiosis, right? And when people come together and work together, that's when they can achieve things. The Empire was a bunch of people in it for themselves. They formed because all of the politicians couldn't agree. We're seeing that today. Our, you know, the Republicans can't get together to have a Speaker of the House, and people in Ukraine and in Israel, Palestine cannot get their aid that we're supposed to help them with. Ultimately, we may have a shutdown because there's no symbiosis. And so I think, you know, we can study episodes 1 through 6, and we can apply them to real life and to history. What can we apply 7 through 9 to?
Star Wars. Like,
Star Wars.
that's it. They are I enjoy all of the sequel trilogy on different levels. For
Well,
different
it
reasons
was
and
nice talking.
no, not at all. This is good. Like I
Well,
like
we've gone
having
on- we've-
conversation. Yeah, go
We've gone on record. We enjoy episode 9. I like episode 9.
Yeah.
But it's the same reason I like episode 2, which a lot of people say is their least favorite, or episode 9 is their least favorite. I like 2. I feel like 2 is the most Flash Gordon serial version of Star Wars that George Lucas put on screen. And I was actually, before I started working on the project I'm working on now, it started dividing up that movie to create a serialized version of it. And it works so good.
That's
It works so
brilliant
good.
idea.
The bit that I've seen is very good.
Yeah. But I like Rise, because here's the thing, and we're going to get into this on our next episode, because we are going to be talking, we usually save this for the end of the show. Our next episode, we're going to be covering The Last Jedi, because we are going to be watching the director in The Jedi, the documentary made for that movie. Because, again, like, this movie feels like such a retread, and watching Force Awakens now really made me want to watch The Last Jedi, because I'm not the biggest Last Jedi fan. I really like the stuff with Luke. I don't really care for the other stuff, but like really seeing how different it is makes me really interested in revisiting it.
Yeah.
Because, we've gotten so much Star Wars in the last, 7 years. And I am getting fatigue. Andor was a huge bright spot for me. After watching Rebels and Clone Wars, Ahsoka was a bright spot for me until the final episode. I thought just landed with a thud.
I thought it started with a thud. I think
episode
5 was phenomenal. It's like one of the best Star Wars anything I've
Is
ever
that Filoni's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
5 was
Yeah.
Full
But
Jedi?
it's so now it's like I'm kind of like I want Andor, and I think you saying the reason why Andor is different is because it's about history. I think I like that more. There was history stuff in Ahsoka, but it's all fantasy based. I'm not huge into fantasy. I want the science of Star Wars, and I like the adventure. I mean, like Solo is my favorite Star Wars movie of the Disney era. There's no fantasy. There's no bullshit. It's an adventure serial basically. It's more slick and more modern.
Solo's the closest to episode 2, I'd say, of the Disney era movies, just because of that adventure feel to it. Is
I think Rogue One's the best, honestly.
Oh yeah,
that's my favorite of the.
Yeah, but I think
era.
Solo gets crapped on a lot, and it's a much better movie than I think people give it credit for. I don't think it was fair to Alden Ehrenreich. I think had they not had Harrison Ford in episode 7, I think people would have liked Solo more, because I think it was hard for them, because they were reminded, that this very distinctive actor who defined this role is Han Solo, and then it's like, oh yeah, there's this new guy. But I think of Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, and I grew up with Alec Guinness, and I think there was enough of you had that buffer where
17 years.
yeah, but it's like when they made Brandon Routh Superman Returns reminded people of Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, and he was very, very similar.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like putting your new significant other in your ex's clothes.
Oof.
It's just not fair to them, and it's kind of fucked up.
Yeah,
but I will say about episode 8, I actually think episode 8 has some good stuff in it. I think that Rian Johnson, he actually had themes within the movie. And it was a Star Wars movie that was working on deconstructing the Star Wars movie. And it ended in such a great place. And I kind of consider that the end. Because like episode 9 is a great sequel to episode 7. They kind of like ignored, because it basically episode 8 put the Resistance back in the place they were in even further, as we can assume at the beginning of episode 4. And I thought that it was a really clever way to go. And it also, I felt made Rey a more powerful character. It said you don't have to be a Skywalker. And in a way, it opened up the concept more across this galaxy far, far away. I don't love what they did with Poe, but, Poe really, I love that Poe is just this old-fashioned hero character. But I can see where they were trying to give him something. I think what it kind of boils down to for me is that they didn't really have a vision of who these new characters were.
There was no cohesion across the films. And I think if they'd had that, I think it's the biggest problem with them in a filmmaking sort of sense, is that there isn't that cohesive thing. If they'd been able to do that, they could have probably dialed in Poe and Finn's arcs better.
They could have given them arcs that made sense.
Yeah.
And it's
because they're all three of them are excellent characters. They're all really fun and engaging and charismatic, actors. And you love watching them. But when you sort of take a step back, and this movie sets everyone up, but then it's the way that they're handled going forward in both the other ones that it's like.
And is that? I mean, I don't know if that's Rian Johnson or if that's Lucasfilm.
Well, they didn't really know what they were doing. Like they've admitted that, maybe we shouldn't have just let every writer do something. They didn't have. And that's where I think Kathleen Kennedy deserves a lot of the blame, because it's his job as producer to make sure that these work. As movies and stories.
I just finished reading Joanna Robertson and Dave Gonzalez's book, MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, and that's fantastic. It's a really, really great book. Even if you're not into the Marvel films, it's just a really good book on filmmaking and the process that they've done. And so much of the focus of that, obviously, is Kevin Feige and how he is the deciding factor. He had to fight for that role. There was like a creative committee and like Perlmutter and like a lot he had to put in, but he put in that fight.
Look at how my cat's sitting.
That's an amazing, it's the most relaxed cat I've ever seen. I love it.
20 pounds. We're trying to get him to lose weight, but he's Eccleston Draper. He's just like,
it looks like
so smug.
The Bond villain would be sat on his lap.
Well, I should have. I'll wait. So, anyways, you were. I got distracted by my.
No, it's all good. But you realize just how much of a fight Kevin Feige had to do to have the control that he does in that. And again, for all of the pros and the cons of the MCU, there is a cohesion to them, or at least there has been until Disney Plus came along. There was a cohesion because he had his finger in all of them. Like he was directly involved with all of them. And Kathleen Kennedy not being the same type of producer probably is at least very partially to blame. I think the biggest thing for me is they went after JJ first. That's been well documented, and he turned it down and said, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want the pressure of doing a Star Wars. And then they were probably looking around still, and then he came back and said, yeah, cool, I'll do one. I'll do this one. I'll relaunch it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So then they had to go, right, crap, we've got these deadlines. We're not shifting these deadlines. Someone in the comments early on mentioned it here. Jeremy Kelly mentioned it. He wished each movie was able to breathe a little longer instead of being sticking to the strict release dates. I think that is a big thing because they had those release dates. They needed to be in production on 8 before they were done with 7.
Yeah.
And so they needed someone else because JJ wasn't coming back at that point.
Yeah.
And so they had someone else. You get someone like Rian Johnson who's going to want to have his own story. He's only going to want to do it if he's going to be able to tell his own thing. And that's where you get the disconnect. And then, of course, you got JJ coming back to quote unquote rescue it from the other version that was out there. And whether you think that one would have been any better or not, I've skim read the scripts and it's fine. There's some stuff that's interesting. There's some stuff that's really terrible. It's like he's then reacting to Ryan's movie and trying to sequelize his movie, and none of it gels very well together. but they're still fun rides.
But
In my
that's
opinion.
the producer's job, though. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of like,
Tie it.
you know, I'm a comic book guy, mostly a comic book historian, and a good editor takes, like, we'll say, a Superman book, and they make sure that from each creative team to the next,
Yeah.
you know, there's at least enough cohesion, so that,
Yeah.
you know, these are people who get the characters. But when you don't know who the characters are, and when you don't have it, this is what really kills me, is that they had Dave Filoni there the entire time. And it's kind of like the way, and I'm not saying Dave Filoni needed to direct the movies, but I think that he needed to have a hand as a producer. It's almost as if your roommate is an electrician and you go ahead and hire an outside contractor to fix your outlet.
Right.
It's just like mind-boggling that they had this guy who was Lucas's protege, who proved through Clone Wars that, like, he gets it. Like, he understands how everything is.
Yeah.
Because you need someone to kind of, like a Kevin Feige, to make sure there's a consistency. And it just, this whole concept of, you know, we're going to build a shared cinematic universe with Star Wars the same way Marvel does. Okay, that's a great idea. But if you don't have anyone who really has a sense of what this universe is and how we form it, then that really can.
I mean, it's been evidenced. It's been evidenced by all the other, like the DCEU or the very quickly failed Universal Monsters, like Dark Universe thing. Like all of these, like shared universe attempts that were reactionary to Marvel. Like none of them worked because none of them had that same central figure in control of it all.
This is the analogy I gave in my superhero class. Between the DC and Marvel cinematic universes. Okay, Ralph, you have a stake. James, you have a stake. Apologies if either of you are vegan, but just go with me.
Oh, a steak.
All right, a steak. Okay, so you're both starving, and James is like, I'm going to eat this fucking steak now. You throw it into the microwave. You microwave it for like 3 minutes. Ralph is like, fuck that. I'm going to like pan sear it. I'm going to put it in the oven and you know, cast iron skillet. I'm going to season it. Maybe it'll take 2 hours. I don't care. Well, whose steak is going to be better?
Ralph's.
Ralph's, because Ralph took the time to really tend to the steak, and he let the steak slowly marinate and cook. And I feel like the MCU is Ralph's steak, because
until recently, I agree with you.
Until recently, but like initially, and then the DCU I feel was kind of like
go, catch up, catch up.
Very reactionary.
Yeah, very like, we're gonna get this done quick. You know, and it's just my feeling. There's some great comments. Stevie said he's the Jeff Goldblum of cats. He's
absolutely.
Use that, Stevie. Thank you so much.
Jeremy Kelly here again. He wants his Marvel to be Marvel and his Star Wars to be Star Wars. Yeah, I'm not saying that I want my Star Wars to be Marvel at all. I always want my Star Wars to be Star Wars. I think Ralph, I don't know if we've mentioned it on the show, but Ralph and I think are both pretty burnt out on most of the MCU stuff at this point. And
you haven't watched Loki.
But it's just the cohesion is all I'm talking about. That's the only analogy that I'm making between the two.
But here's the thing. So with The Force Awakens in 2015, when that trailer dropped, I remember where I was when I saw that trailer, that teaser trailer, where BB-8's rolling in the desert and Finn gets up in the desert, and the desert and the desert and the desert. So many deserts in Star Wars. Again, it's retreading stuff. You know, new planets, guys.
It's Jakku. It's not Tatooine. Come on, man.
It's not Tatooine.
Yeah. They may dress like people on Tatooine, but it's not Tatooine.
But I mean, the hype for me and the excitement for me for The Force Awakens was the fact that we hadn't had it in like 10 years.
That's it.
And the excitement for episode 1 is I hadn't had it in 17 years. Yep. And so it's one of those things where it's like, Star Wars, I don't think, the more you start shoving Star Wars down our throats, the less special it becomes. And I'm really feeling that.
You know, this is the thing I have. So I had a friend, Seth Kushner, who I worked on a book with, Leaping Tall Buildings. And Seth was diagnosed with leukemia around the time they announced Episode 7. He's a huge Star Wars fan, and it actually cleared up, like it went away, and a few months or so, maybe about 8 months before the movie was going to come out, and our plan was for me to go up to New York and see it with him for show. And his brain cancer, he developed brain cancer, possibly from the chemo, and it took him in the May of that year. He was a little bit older than me, just a few years. So it was hard for me because I didn't have him with me. But it really drove home the experience of seeing Star Wars and how important Star Wars was, because we hadn't had it in years. And I do remember the thing I will say about the Lucas films is that Lucas was brilliant to have each one a different set of films. Like they're visually, and so the problem with the new one with Episode 7 was it felt too much like Star Wars by design. And it didn't feel quirky, different, or original enough. But I want you to keep in mind, like, we're talking about how quick they rushed through these. The original Star Wars movies took years to develop because they were practical. And then when they became digital, they still took years to develop. And it's kind of back to my steak analogy. Like, the older movies up until maybe 15 to 20 years ago were not crapped out. They were crafted. They were developed slowly. They, you know, they may have had to rush all of those special effects on Return of the Jedi at the last minute, but it still looked really damn good. They still spent a long time crafting the story. That's not the case with these. They turn them around very quickly.
The next one's in production before the last one's finished. Yeah,
but it doesn't mean they should, you know. And so we have this assembly line.
It's what gives me hope for whatever the next one ends up being, whether it's Dave's or the Rey movie or whatever it is, because they've now taken this time. The hope is that they've gone, okay, cool, right. We got it. We put them out. We did these 5 films for however you want, however you like them or dislike them, or what levels people enjoyed them. Yeah. But now we sort of established it. We've got it on TV. Fine. Let's wait until a film is ready. Instead of setting a release date and marching towards it, whether it's ready or not, let's make a movie, and when it's ready, release it.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if they got a director who did not normally make genre films to do Star Wars. I mean, really, because again, Lucas was a new Hollywood guy.
Yeah.
His contemporaries were Scorsese and, of course, Francis Ford Coppola, famously. And it's just so I was talking with the gentleman who he was in American Graffiti, Terry McGovern. He was like the creepy teacher, right?
Oh, okay.
And then later he did some voiceover work for George in Star Wars: A New Hope. He was these aren't the droids we're looking for. That was him. But he was talking about American Graffiti, and it's just like Lucas. If anyone hasn't seen American Graffiti, I think it's his best film. Yeah, it's so good, and like the sound design alone is. Good. I teach it for the sound design alone, but also the way he filmed it was he treated it like a documentary. So he would let the actors improvise. You know, he cast them all as an ensemble, and he would just kind of like sit back and like they do the scene, and he wouldn't say anything, and the actors just like, "Are we?" And that's how you get this sense of realism. And so he brought that sense of realism in how he made even Star Wars: A New Hope. But you know, there's still that sense of fun. It's almost like you have adults playing kids playing adults in space, and there's a certain energy it brings. And I don't know.
They're playing Star Wars characters. The cast now are playing Star Wars characters as opposed to playing characters who happen to be in Star Wars. Yeah. I still really love
feel like
I feel like we're shitting on it, but like I do still really love it. I watched it last night and I had a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I feel like Solo, the energy in Solo, the movie Solo, comes from Ron Howard's experience with George Lucas.
Yeah.
I talk about Solo a lot.
was our first episode.
I was a
We
guest.
love
It was
that
their,
film.
yeah, I love Solo. But also, just a quick plug. Later today is premiering an episode of the Holdo Maneuver podcast where I'm a guest, where we talk about Solo more. And if you want to hear me just gush about Solo, like,
Yeah. Glover was
that's where to go. It'll be tonight.
amazing Londo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that movie when that comes. And again, that's someone who, because he's Donald and his brother Stephen have written that movie or the latest version of whatever that project will be. I mean, Atlanta's theirs, and they've written stuff before, but I wouldn't strictly say that Atlanta is a genre story. Like it's definitely, there are episodes and there are things in there, but they've done some amazing stuff together. So I am so fascinated with what that will be.
Yeah. Oh, hey,
You know what I just realized?
What?
Is that Ludwig Göransson will probably do the music for that movie.
I hope
for
so.
that
Yeah, I
movie.
mean,
That would be
Yeah.
great.
we just get a new Childish Gambino album just in time for a Lando movie. That'd be great.
Hey, and also, guys, speaking of plugs, before I forget, so I am in Richmond, Virginia. Well, I'm a little outside of Richmond right now, in suburban hell, but I'm outside of Richmond, Virginia. My best friend is a guy named Brett Carreras, and he has an all Star Wars store in Regency Square Mall. And it's just like, it's in an old jewelry store, and he's got like loose figures, he's got vintage figures, he's got like it's insane. I need to get that word out before I forget.
I mentioned that to you, that my job may involve me going to Virginia.
Really? When?
People
when?
who know,
Where about?
I don't know if I'm going to go. I probably shouldn't be mentioning it. I'm producing a documentary about Lost. And so that might take us there. So if people,
Cool.
I hope they don't figure it out. But
Fingers
if it's
crossed.
near Richmond, I'm very excited to do that
Yeah.
interview. But also, I'm going to go to that store because I have
Hell
a
yeah.
Darth Vader carrying case that my sister got me about, I don't know, 15 years ago, that I've been slowly filling up over the course of the last 15
Yeah, I've
years.
got one
And,
right here. I picked one up.
Mine's
And also, I got like about 8 years ago, a guy at a garage sale. Okay, I'm gonna I'm on a boot for my right foot because I have this annoying like there's a tiny bone right under my big toe that's out of whack, so I've got to go get a CAT scan. But this guy was just like, for $100, I got a land speeder, which I'd always wanted. And this wonderful case. Have you guys seen one of these before?
Oh, not seen that. That's awesome.
Star World. It's not Star Wars, but it's Star World. And in it,
I know somebody that has that Darth Vader, the Star
I have
World
the
Darth Vader
case right here.
Yeah, but that fake Darth Vader.
All
that's
of them. They're like in amazing shape,
That's
and
great.
all original. They don't have
there's
the
a couple
weapons,
I need.
but
Is that the
these are
first
ones
12?
great.
Like the ones that were like the Christmas card pack ones? Is that the same
Which
12?
early bird? Are those the
The
early bird?
bird. Is that the early bird
I
set?
don't
Or
know.
No.
I
Oh,
have
okay.
no
Luke- I
clue.
think
don't
Luke was
think
in there.
They are,
Luke
but,
was in
like,
there. Yeah, I don't think there was
Oh, yeah.
a Hammerhead in there,
got
was there?
his lightsaber.
Uh-huh.
And like the retro ones Hasbro does, I think look awful because it feels like they just like take these and make a cast out of the actual figures, and they've got these weird like Nosferatu long hands, and like because I was looking at the Jedi Knight Luke that they made, and I have the original. It's my favorite figure. That
That was
and,
always mine
Symbol
growing up,
Lando.
yeah.
They're
I
so
If you
good.
want
think I
quality-
talked about that last week, that figure and the lightsaber that came with it. I told a story about losing that lightsaber as a kid and it just haunting me.
I don't know where my lightsaber is to
Yeah.
it either.
And if you're looking for quality figures,
Oh.
go get Snap City Swag on Instagram.
Instagram.
And,
yeah. So I make stuff for Mike Allred, and with Mike,
Yeah.
Mike created Madman, which is an amazing indie superhero existentialist pop culture comic book. And you can kind of see all of the Madman stuff right there. But we do have 3 new figures that are going into production really soon.
I'm
and they're
excited. I
you
have
can
mine
order them
pre-ordered.
through Backer Kit if you missed the Kickstarter.
Nice.
And they're it's a madman without his mask. His name's Frank Einstein, and he's got like a metal plate and scars and green skin. And Madwoman and It Girl. We hit some kind of issues with the factory, but so they're a little later coming out than we hoped.
That's fine.
But yeah, they're coming out, and then I have an idea for a really sexy Madman figure after that. But we're still, it won't be that. I was originally going to do an Atomics line, but we can't find a factory that will do kind of the numbers we want anymore. So I have something else that I'm coming up with, but that's like within the next
Down the
year.
line. Cool.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to hear Mike Allred talk about Mandalorian, which he's probably the biggest fan I know, he was on my Patreon covering the finale of season one, the season 1 finale, I think. Yeah. And that's on my Patreon, but it's also on our YouTube channel if you look for Ralph's Mandalorian show. That was pre live action Star Wars.
What sort of kickstarted all of it, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike's great. Mike's an enormous Star Wars nut, and he's friends with Robert Rodriguez, so he just went nuts when Boba Fett came out.
Yeah,
it's just his 2 favorite things, isn't it? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Christopher. I'm not sure if there is, but I want to hear about some things that you maybe do like about this film. Let's not
episode 7.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I love the cast.
Great.
The cast is
I want to talk about
phenomenal.
The cast.
And this is what kills me is that the classic trilogy had Lucas cast an ensemble, and they were unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
But with the prequels, I feel like they kind of cast flavors for the week. They were they were established actors. People knew who they were. And it didn't mean they necessarily had the best chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy to have seen Hayden Christensen get a chance to show us how amazing he is as Anakin.
Yeah.
Because I feel like he was kind of robbed in those movies. So I love the cast. I love seeing Han Solo again, but I think I have more criticism than I have praise for those movies, but
I like BB-8. Like I thought
I was
BB-8
gonna
was
say
a rad
that was
design.
one of the things.
When
I was watching it last night,
Yeah.
I thought, like, because it starts with him. He's the first sort of character we see. We see some stormtroopers first, but he's the first character that we see, and I feel like that was a big thing for the movie. And I think it's quite telling that your reaction to BB-8 there was, I think for audiences, they show him so early and they feature him so early that it's like, if this character's work, if it doesn't, or you're middling on it, it probably is going to be like, that's your feeling for the film. Like, and
I have an anecdote around that. So my son, he's 6, but I didn't think I was ever going to have kids at this point. Like, I always wanted kids, but I just like, I don't know if it's going to work out for me. And I was really upset that I didn't have a son or a daughter to enjoy Star Wars with. But I did take my niece, who I think she was 5 or 6 at the time. And she loved R2-D2. And I took her to see episode 7. I was really excited. We're in a full theater, and she started squirming. And I'm just like, okay. I'm like, sweetie, just sit down. Come on, we've got it. And she was just really kind of cutting up a bit. And she wanted to sit on my lap. And she was like, I have to go to the bathroom. Then she's like, I'm bored. And so it's just like, okay, well, she's 5 or 6, she wanted to leave, and I asked her in the hallway as I was getting passes. I'm like, I just want to know why do you want to leave? It's okay. You're not in trouble. I'm not upset with you. And she's like, well, I was waiting for R2-D2 and he didn't show up. And I was so proud of her, in a weird way. But I think my problem with BB-8 is that he's too good. Like the reason, I think R2 works is R2's a little bit of an asshole, but we
Oh,
don't
he is.
really
He's
know what
withholding
he's
it
saying.
in the best way.
BB-8's like, he's a good little boy. And,
Yeah.
he's cute, but he does, and he also doesn't have a foil, which I think is part
Yeah.
of what hurts it. So it's kind of like, for me, R2 and 3PO are the kind of the core of Star Wars. They're based off the peasants.
George Lucas said it was supposed to be through their eyes. It's the hidden fortress.
Hidden Fortress, yeah. So you take the lowest social class, and so you witness war from their perspective. But so yeah, not having R2 at least. Like, I can understand 3PO because, God bless Anthony Daniels for still putting that goddamn suit on. And I mean, God bless the man.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like, yeah, I mean, you didn't have a character who was more relatable in that sense with BB-8. But I mean, he looked amazing. He's a brilliant droid. I just
think
wish
he's
had
got personality. It's just the personality didn't necessarily work for you. I think your analogy there of him being like a good little boy, I think the difference between him and R2 is like, BB-8's this really pretty well behaved but adorable little puppy, whereas R2's a slightly older dog who knows when he can push the boundaries. He knows when he can be a bit of a dick.
And then Chopper doesn't
run
give a
in that
shit.
puddle. And then Chopper's that
Chopper's
dog
great.
who hasn't really been trained very well.
He's
but
a cat.
You love him anyway.
That's the analogy.
Yeah.
He's like Eccleston. Yeah, I mean, there's this great moment in, and again, it's a character moment, and I don't feel like they had enough of these. Where when I say character moment, it's an action that reveals more about who the character is. And there's this great one where there's like a droid that I think the Empire had put a virus or did some type of control, and they clear the control out, and the droid's like, do, and they're on the ship, and BB-8 pushes him out of like the bomb port or something. And like, woo! And it's just like, wow.
Oh
like,
Chopper's a mass murderer. Like he's got a body count for sure. Like
he's such
I
an
saw
asshole.
someone took the shots of them in that tribunal in Ahsoka, and they had a shot of, I think, what was it, Carson Tava and Chopper there, and it was just a screenshot. And I think the caption was like, if someone had told me that this was a war crimes trial, like I would have absolutely believed it, because he he's killed a lot of people. I think he blew up a Star Destroyer on his own at some point.
Fucking cold.
Yeah,
But,
he used like some sort of magnetic device to collide two Star Destroyers together.
It's amazing.
yeah.
When he didn't have to.
No,
at
no.
least
He does it out of spite.
ride space horses across them.
Yeah.
It's like space horses. Like all you do is go. Boom. Sorry, man. And it's also another thing that bothers me with the 9 is it's kind of like they just, yes, they had Londo. I'm so glad, but it's kind of like they set the black people off doing this thing, and it's just like no. What's so great about the classic Star Wars is, granted, they only had like one brother in the whole galaxy. But that was like a level of representation we just didn't have.
Yeah.
In 1983. I felt
and it was never a thing. It wasn't ever like there wasn't an obvious sort of segregation of characters because, unfortunately, because there was only one. But he was involved with everyone else. He was integrated with everyone else. Yeah.
It just that always rubbed me the wrong way with Episode 9. Is I just because I and another thing that I loved about 7 was the Finn and Poe bromance.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I think
they
of it
should have went
but
forward
I
through that.
through the lens of being a parent, and I want my son to see media where we have people of all different backgrounds, people who love differently.
Representation is important.
Differently,
yeah,
it is. And I also really want to have my son seeing close male relationships.
Yeah,
because my male friends, I tell them I love them, I give them hugs.
Yeah,
and I think that it's really important to have that model because Luke and Han had a pretty close relationship.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
Yes, Tommy, my cat's named Eccleston Draper. He's named. I've actually told this to Christopher Eccleston in person. I moderate for GalaxyCon, and I was like, "Yeah, I named my cat after you." The reason why, and I didn't tell this to Chris, who's a lovely man, if you ever get to meet him. He's kind of grumpy and curmudgeonly in real life, but like that's who he's really super
Harrison
super
Ford.
kind. Oh my god,
I think of the Doctor Who I've seen, I think I gravitated towards him the most. He reminded me of like a Timothy Dalton type of Bond, where he was just like,
he's phenomenal. But Eccleston wears all black. My cat also wears all black. He has big ears, and he vocally defies authority. And Draper is his last name after Don Draper, because
I was going to say it's got to be Mad Men.
Yeah,
Right?
he always would love any of my female friends, and he also stuck his nose in my old fashioned one night. So. Sorry, I had to answer.
Smokes like a chimney as well.
He does. I know, like 7 packs a day. It's and I have to tell the vet he's the first diagnosed case of kitty emphysema. Just finding he has to roll his own cigarettes, right? Actually, I have to roll them for him. Don't tell anyone. I'm sorry, SPCA. Please don't arrest me. He's old enough that he can, in cat years, he's like the equivalent of 18, I think.
There you go. Yeah.
But
yeah, our cats are James Bond
Stevie.
What are
the cats' names?
So we have Vesper, who we named Vesper ourselves. She's a handful. She kept me up all last night, so I am like dead tired. And then we have Franz, who came with the name, so he's Franz Oberhauser from Spectre. I think that's a trend
Bond?
that would continue.
Who's your favorite Bond?
I think Daniel Craig, is the best one.
Mm-hmm.
My Bond ranking of Bond actors is real. It's not conventional. It's really not conventional.
My favorite is Dalton.
Yeah, see, he's my number 2. I love Dalton.
I love the books. I have like a full set here. And Dalton is my favorite because to me he captures the character physically but also emotionally. He didn't have his movies, I don't think, were as strong as like what they did with Dalton. I mean with Craig. I'll tell you an anecdote is my book Cliffhanger, which is about the movie serials with superheroes in them. I actually tracked down the son of the first actor to play Batman. Was the first Batman in the 1943 serial was Lewis Wilson. Well, his son is Michael G. Wilson, who co-produces the Bond films. And I got an interview.
Oh, wow.
Wait, what?
2 weeks after No Time to Die came out, Michael was kind enough to give me like half an hour or something.
Oh my God.
And he was lovely and gregarious.
That's amazing.
Great laugh. But yeah, his parents divorced and his mother remarried to Cubby Broccoli.
Yeah.
But yeah, no one had ever really asked him about his dad before, not in that sense. He's like, so I got an interview with like the co-producer of like one of my favorite film series ever.
He's been in this series since like I think The Spy Who Loved Me. But he did writing with like Richard Maybaum on some of that stuff. As soon as Saltzman was out with the Mouth of Gold.
He's phenomenal, and his sister is a great producer too. I mean, I think she's. But the thing they did with Bond that I don't think people realize is they very kind of slowly marched him towards progressiveness. It wasn't like an instant changeover. All of a sudden he's not a misogynist. They really kind of they walked him towards that by calling it out within the GoldenEye. There's a section where M
calls him a misogynist dinosaur.
Yeah, and it was brilliant. Like I wish more studios would look to the James Bond model rather than feel like they have to make it the MCU model.
I agree with that completely. I think that would be a real interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, stick Alden Ehrenreich in a post Jedi.
Yeah, we've talked about it. If they need
Genevieve O'Reilly
now. Yeah, Genevieve O'Reilly
came in Ahsoka after. Yeah. So there's one line in The Force Awakens that I thought helped for me personally, that helped with the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
And it's Princess Leia's line to Luke, or General Organa's line to Han, is Luke's a Jedi, you're his father.
Yeah.
And her saying, you're the one that you're his dad, you should be able to be the one that turns him. That's the case in The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
You know, they had to do some tap dancing to make that work because his character was dead at the time. Really liked that. That line really liked that, because it's kind of, you know, it kind of mirrors Luke's story and Luke turning his father back to the side of good. So that line for me,
And
I think,
and it is a through line. I think like his moment on the bridge with Han when he kills Han, I think that he's not faking it when he says, will you help me, or anything like that. He's obviously luring him in to kill him, but I think he is yeah, it's such a good performance, but I think he is feeling that pull. He says it throughout the film, he's feeling the pull to the light.
But you know what they did though, and this is where Rian Johnson is, I think, brilliant.
Yeah,
is Rian Johnson basically was like, guess what, we're going to go through all of the motions you're going to expect.
Yeah,
we're going to do a cover
do the turn.
Okay, do you know the band James?
Yeah, sit down.
Okay, they from the 90s. Yeah, they did a song called Laid. This bed is on fire. Big hit for them. Well, I had heard that, haven't gotten to see him, but I had heard that
I think I have seen them at a festival. Yeah,
I would fucking love to see him. They just like rushed through it first thing because they're like, okay, we did it.
Get rid of it. Yeah,
I felt like Rian Johnson kind of did that with with Last Jedi, where it's like, okay, these are all of the beats you expect from Empire Strikes Back. Hey, guess what? We're going to cover everything that you expect from Return of the Jedi. And then we're going to subvert it where it's like, oh shit, Kylo Ren, he's so far gone, he ain't going to turn. And so, you know, there's this great scene where Luke has his just like, he goes out like a boss, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Kylo's like, what, are you going to try and save me? And Luke's like, no. It's just like, you're done. You know, and I think that there was a power narratively to that. What I think was ultimately missing is everything was laid out in the hero's journey, right? Lucas based the brilliance of those movies is that we saw the hero's journey for Luke, for those of us who grew up with the classics. And then when they brought the prequel in, you realized all along it was Vader's hero's journey. Vader becomes a hero at the end, ultimately. But there was still a whole section called the apotheosis, where basically a hero goes into the underworld, gets the elixir, which they bring back to the real world to kind of save the day. And I really felt like what was missing through 7 through 9 was Anakin's apotheosis, right? And it wouldn't even have to be the central character, but there's something they really should have done with it and could have done with it if they were really going to follow what Lucas had quite actually and literally laid out with 1 through 6. Because again, that's the reason the hero's journey is so prevalent, is because it's a framework that works, right?
Yeah, it has for all time.
Yeah, for all time. And when you decide to make these movies with absolutely no framework in place, except maybe the other movies, you know, I think it's really a crime that Colin Trevorrow never got to make Duel of the Fates, because it sounds like, you know, the last shot of Duel of the Fates would have been Leia restoring R2's memory with a disc. And so she's redoing, you know, the fame. I get chills thinking about it because Carrie Fisher was my first crush, you know. I get chills thinking about it. But
there is, I think there's some interesting stuff in the Duel of the Fates, but I mean, obviously it wasn't a finished shooting script ready to go or anything.
But Hux lost the Star War.
Yeah. The stuff with Hux in it, I think, is excellent. I think it's really interesting. Hux and Finn really shine in that version of what that could have been.
You know, my kid calls the Star Wars figure the Star Wars. That's his blanket term for all the character.
Yeah.
It's like it's the Star Wars. I'm gonna play with the Star Wars.
Great. That's I mean
Great.
that's what you want. Like I love that. I think it's combining everything together. You don't need to worry about, oh, this person never interacted with that person. They weren't in the same films together. That's 30 years later. Who cares?
Yeah.
They're toys. Play with it.
We're all-
Like, and
they're
tell your own stories. Like,
They're all mixed up, and he also does Transformers Star Wars crossovers. pretty
Awesome.
regularly.
I used to do GI Joe and Star Wars like stuff when I was a kid because I had a bunch of GI
cool.
Joes and a bunch of Star Wars figures.
Dude, I'm a big GI Joe fan. I did
I think I put Quick Kick ended up in my snow speeder.
no, I did the book on Larry Hama, Conversations for University of Mississippi, and no, I think GI Joe is the best ongoing comic book series of the 1980s. I really do, because it combines satire with social relevancy, the Vietnam War. It pokes
See,
fun at yuppie
that's the thing
culture.
with GI Joe over here. Like I was too young for the comics to have read them at the time, and we never got the cartoon over here that I'm aware of. If we did, again, before my time. So for me, I only was ever making up my own stories with those figures because they were just cool toys. So
did you
I was
have Action Force?
yeah, and Action Man was like the big like 12-inch.
Yeah, because there
They
was
tried to make Action Man a thing over here once.
Yeah.
Briefly, but yeah, I know Action Force
probably
was
in that,
the name of the British GI Joe stuff, but
okay. Maybe, but I was always that weird kid who was playing with other toys than
and you're
everyone
born
else
in
was playing.
'88, so you might
87,
have
87,
yes, you might have missed the boat.
Maybe. I had an older brother and sister who are like 7 and 9 years older than me, so all of my stuff is from their generation, which is I think why Ralph and I always seem to connect on pop culture stuff more than people me and my own age.
No,
Everyone
I get
looks
it.
at me like, what are you talking about? What are you referencing? And I'm like, it's before your time, and I'm a month younger than them.
My kid's school, I'll pick them up and hang out on the playground with them after, and like all of the moms, because the dads don't hang out. I'm like the sole dad on the playground, but all the moms are like 10 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And they're just very lovely, kind. They're very suburban, and they're just, and I'll make these like movie references pop that they don't get. And there's this one other parent there, Kristen, who what I love about her is like, she's like, just looks at me like you don't know what I'm talking about, do you? So like, no,
that's most conversations that I have with like Joe Public or like random strangers or friends of friends. They're just like, I don't know what you're saying, but you're saying it with passion. So good for you.
Yeah, man. I mean, really, it's all good. But yeah. So what do you when episode 7 wrapped, when the end credits went on, where did you guys think it was going to go from there?
Ooh, I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, the thing I remember talking to my wife about it and being like, "Oh, clearly Kylo Ren's got to become good." Like it felt like we all kind of knew where the story was going, and I don't.
I think with episode 7, I felt very much like that was a really cool, and I got the sort of it's a reimagining remake sort of vibe from it, but I enjoyed the ride and I enjoyed the new version of it so much that I wasn't really worried about where it was going to go. I remember coming out of The Last Jedi and having so many thoughts and feelings and not sure how I felt about it at the time, and I asked my now ex-wife to drive because I was like, I need to just sit with this for a minute and like think. And so I just sort of sat there and I was writing a daily blog at the time, and I got home and I just spewed all my thoughts out, and I ended up being like the way I thought it was going to go. And in doing that, I discovered that I really loved it, and then I saw it again like 2 days later, and I really loved it. Whereas coming out of The Force Awakens, I think I just enjoyed I enjoyed I didn't think about it too much. I think I just enjoyed it for what it was presenting. It was popcorn. It was just.
And at the time, seeing a Star Wars on a big screen, was more of the experience of it than what the movie was.
That's it. I mean, Christopher, you were saying about your experience of it and how it was sort of bittersweet in a way, and
you know who I saw it? Yeah, I saw it with Will, who was, I used to be an elementary art teacher.
Okay.
And Will was around 2000, and Will was like my little Padawan, right?
Amazing.
He was in 3rd grade. He was super goofy kid, loved Transformers, loved G.I. Joe. And I loved being his mentor. I left the job I had a principal who was just like, okay, I'll put it this way. It's a G.I. Joe reference. I was doing some G.I. Joe things with Devil's Due, the comic book.
Yeah, wow. There's a name from the past.
I was doing like a website. It was a mock news website called Lens. And it was like Scoop, who's the battle photographer, is his site. And I modeled Cobra Commander after my principal because he was this narcissistic piece of shit. He was actually like, he had a lisp. He was Cobra Commander. But anyways, Will actually went with me, and now Will's like twice my size. He's just a big dude, so it made it. He really kind of saved the experience.
Yeah,
for
that's
me.
nice.
But I'll say I was kind of like you. I was like, okay. I understand why they wanted to get back to the classics, because of how people were about the.
It's the first
safe.
line. This will begin to make things right. And it was like, at the time, I was like, oh wow, that's pointed. But now I'm just like, I don't know how I feel about that line now.
You know what? They didn't try and make things original. They had amazing redesigns of the stormtroopers. I love the redesigns.
Yeah, I like them.
All the designs, I think.
But
really
we
good.
needed more of like Kylo Ren stopping a laser bolt midair.
Yeah.
Because the minute like that opening scene is great. Because it's very much like, oh shit.
Yeah.
It's like he's possibly stronger.
Leveled up. Yeah.
But I gotta tell you, episode 8, I took my partner, Kat, and Grayson was at a babysitter's, and I took a few of my students. And I gotta say, man, like, I thought the lightsaber fight in episode 7 was solid. But episode 8, it also gutted me. And so the whole point of like a fight scene is that there has to be some sort of like, it's a resolution to some conflict or a reflection of a conflict. And that's why you don't want to have too many lightsaber battles, because they seem less big when you do have them. But episode 8, like, I was just like, wow. I was invested in seeing how the battles would go, but they showed that all bets were off early on in the movie. When Poe goes in like the cavalry and fucks everything over, that's telling you, okay, shit's real. So you don't know what's going to happen to Luke, what's going to happen to Leia, what's going to happen to almost any of them. And so the stakes are believable and they're real. So that's why I think, as much as people want to bitch about Canto Blight, which I thought Canto Blight was, I understand why they did Canto Blight. I liked it enough, but it was basically like, hey, guess what? The same things we did, our plan to infiltrate the Star Destroyer and do whatever, like it's not going to work. Those things don't work anymore. We have to think of something new. And in a way, if you look at it as like commentary on Star Wars, it's kind of cutting when episode 9 rehashes a lot of the same shit. But the battles in episode 9, I was not invested because it's like choreography. It's like,
it's the same reason that I don't love Duel of the Fates fight scene as much as some of the others, because it feels too much just like a choreographed dance as opposed to a fight with emotional weight.
But everyone, it's funny because I watch, like, as we get older and as we get more learned, I guess, we can watch things that we've grown up with in different ways, but also seeing the films on the big screen makes an enormous difference. Especially,
it was.
But I'll tell you, episode 6, that movie is a masterpiece in editing, and that final act between, and it's uneven in places, I think, but the final act, the editing between you've got the Death Star, you've got the Emperor's Throne Room, you have Endor.
Yep.
And it's the reason the unevenness works because the scenes on Endor kind of give you a little breathing. And then it's intense when they're, when Londo and the Falcon.
Wedge is doing his thing.
They all hit their low points at the same time.
Yeah. It's
Lucas does that in episode 1 as well.
Third act, I think. Yeah.
But seeing movies in the theater, what I love about it, as opposed to the TV shows, I remember every single viewing of Star Wars. Across the board. My sister posted this earlier. Before we get started, let me just say that I love this movie so much. Seeing it in the theater with my entire family is a great memory for me. Like, I remember where I stood in line for every single time I saw episode 1, 2, 3.
How long did you wait for episode 1?
We decided that we were going to wait 12 hours.
Yeah, I did 8 hours before we got in, but maybe
seating.
Yeah, we're at the Chinese. We're at the Chinese theater.
And
so they had
really
one. So they had one line, and we had to show. This was before the internet really had online ticket sales. A week before the tickets went on sale for episode 1, me and my friends drove from Orange County to Hollywood. Went to the Chinese theater. We each picked up 10 tickets because that was the maximum. We ended up getting something like 30 tickets because there's 3 of us.
Yeah.
And then I had to hold on to those tickets next to my nightstand, next to my bed, because if anything happened to these paper tickets, I wasn't going to get to see Star Wars.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it's like, okay, we figured out who's getting the 30 tickets. And then we're going to show up. It was like a 10 p.m. showing because it was a Friday. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting there by 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And it was one line for the entire day. And as showings went in, the one line started filtering out the people that are going into the theater. And it just got closer and closer and closer.
Wow.
Until for our showing, we were the first in line. But it's one of those things I remember seeing Force Awakens at a theater across the way with my family. Wasn't assigned seats, but then by the time The Last Jedi came out, assigned seats were there, and so that's what I love about going to see Star Wars movies. Even if the Rise of Skywalker isn't for everybody, I'm sure sitting down in that theater and I kind of wish that Disney, since they now Fox, would put the Fox logo back in front of all the sequel movies.
Nice.
But sitting there and getting that sort of fanfare, that 20th Century Fox fanfare, and then the silence, it's the anticipation.
They brought it back for Star Wars. The fanfare had been gone.
Yeah.
And when Lucas put it on, because the fanfare was part of his memories growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where every single viewing in the theater, it's still special, even though we're getting the next TV show is just around the corner. Nothing beats sitting in the theater and seeing Star Wars.
I still remember it vividly, all of my viewings as well. It's the same thing. My episode 1 viewing was that catharsis of I'd already seen a pirate copy of it because it came out later here, but I'd been anticipating it so much. That was it. Seeing the special editions with my dad, and then anticipating it all so much with my dad, him dying a couple of months before it came out, and everything that was such a no. I mean, it's similar to what you were saying about episode 7. It hit in a different way for that reason, and I was 12 years old, and it was amazing. I loved that movie. Went through all of that, and then for me, I never stopped reading the books or playing reading comics or playing the games or anything like that. I was always still so into Star Wars, but I'd dropped off of the Clone Wars at some point, and so I'd pick it up and I'd watch 3 or 4 episodes, and then I'd drop off again. But in 2012, when the sale happened, and I remember I was walking to work from where I'd parked my car, and I was on slashfilm.com, and I was just reading all of the news as I was walking, nearly getting hit by cars because I just couldn't believe what I was reading.
Yeah.
And then at that point, subconsciously, my mind was like, Oh, we're 100% back in now. Like, and we like because
Yeah.
it's all that build up, and then we had that 3 years of anticipation, and so yeah, I was in the bag for it before it even came out. So I don't think
Yeah.
that they could have done much with this film to have made me not like it that first time round.
Yeah. Well,
I-
it's,
Yeah,
you
I
hit on
was
the
so in.
experience, right?
I think,
know,
yeah,
Do you guys? I miss midnight showings
yeah, I do.
because
I
I feel like I
do,
can't.
Yeah,
I probably
I
couldn't do
do.
it
I
anymore.
could,
No,
Anymore.
I could still do it. But just I physically, the last couple of times that I did it, I
Yeah.
was like, and I work nights. I work until 4:30 in the morning every
Wow.
night, so I'm used to being up at that sort of time.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I sit down, I get comfy, and I'm just like, I just want to go to sleep now. I've been in movie theaters that I've really enjoyed the film.
Yeah.
I just want to. I've fallen asleep in the middle of films that I've really loved.
I'll tell you my last midnight showing because they stopped doing them a while
Okay.
ago.
Yeah.
My last one was Green Lantern, and we saw it in Wall Street. There's a
At least it's
regional in
short.
Wall Street, and
At least it's
the
short.
only time I was like, "What the fuck did I stay up this late for?" Yeah,
I have so much Green Lantern stuff.
I mean,
love- well, I have,
Kyle's just there behind you.
I
Yeah,
have.
my quarter scale Kyle Rayner statue.
Yeah, I saw your Kyle. I knew Marty Nodell pretty well, who created
Wow.
Green Lantern, and God, he was hilarious. But yeah, I just loved being because the thing is there was a period where like Star Wars wasn't fashionable, right? And
Oh,
like a lot of what made Star Wars cool, I credit to Kevin Smith, really, with his films and dropping. He was the first person to like drop Star Wars references in stuff.
like '93 when no one was doing it, especially
course.
like yeah.
And so it's kind of like the ability to be in a packed theater with people who loved the same thing you do that much.
Yeah.
And I remember watching episode 3. The Regal put like a commercial for Axe body spray up before them. And it was like, we had to sit through previews and we're all suffering together. But there's something really magic about that, which is part of why I teach at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, in the communication arts department. And our students are going to be concept designers, video game designers, comic book artists, and being able to sit in a space and watch it projected with them. I took my son when we watched Return of the Jedi. I ran it by my class. I'm like, hey guys, my kid's 5. He loves Star Wars. I would love to bring him, to see it. And they're really cool about it. And
That's great.
But I'll tell you,
Was that back in April, the 40th anniversary screenings just gone?
What was that?
Was that back in April, like during the 40th anniversary
No,
screenings?
this was in my one of my Star Wars classes.
Oh,
It
okay.
was in Star Wars Effect, and we watched. And I have like the original versions on DVD, not the special editions.
Yeah.
But my dad, who I lost him about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I lost track. I remember sitting right next to him in the theater, in the State Theater in Farmville, Virginia, my hometown, watching Return of the Jedi. And I remember when the Star Wars logo came up, I was so excited. I went, Star Wars!
That's
I
great.
was 6, So it is a generational thing, and it's very important to be able to watch it with family. I worry about it not being special enough. And, because again, like, we had 3 movies and that was done.
Yep.
And then it's like, oh wait, we're gonna have 3 more.
It's something
And
that
that
we
was
talk
it,
about a
really.
lot is that absence is what made it, and it still makes it because it's still special to us that there's new Star Wars. Like we've had probably definitely had longer stretches of time now where there has been Star Wars than there hasn't, but that absence was so strong for me. It was only really like 10-12 years, but it was those 10-12 formative years at the beginning that there wasn't any. So I was the weird kid playing with toys that no one else played with. I was watching these films that no one else my age gave a shit about. And
hey man,
so
it's
it's
people
so
to talk about 1940s comic books with. That's all.
I mean, that's
saying.
it. Like, it's the same thing. Like, it's, and that's why it'll always still have such a resonance. And I will be able to critique things, but I don't think I'll ever be able to like flat out. I mean, I say this now. I'm sure that there will be times when I just flat out dislike a bit of Star Wars, but like, it's all I can still find the good in all of it. Like, it's still there. It's always there.
I know there's good in you.
No, that's it. Like, it's yeah, exactly that. It's
I just want it in the theater though. I feel like I'm ready for that.
Miss it.
It's been a while.
Why not? I'm. You said something about resonance. I think it's such a great word, and I think knowing that we have very little Star Wars to enjoy makes it feel more important when we go to see it. And when I don't really think that Star Wars should be as heavily on TV. I honestly would rather see them just make these, make movies. Make movies, man.
I'm fine with the series every now and then. I think it's great. I like the expansion of it. As someone who's been reading books and comics, for me it feels like just another expansion of that. But yeah, I mean, Iger's said a lot of dodgy things recently regarding like the strikes and everything like that, and I don't agree with most of the things that he said in that regard. But when they brought him back in, like he full on said, like, no, there's too much of the shows. Like, there's too much of a push for content on Disney Plus, and so we're gonna pull it back. We're gonna pull it back to a point where it's like it's gonna be good. And
well, I think also they're realizing
that was the thing that JPEG pushed for, was just quantity over quality. Like, he usually wanted more.
Yeah, well, also, we're at an interesting point right now where I think streaming came in and studios saw it as a way to be profitable because the Netflix model worked. So why can't this work for us? But it didn't offset the budgets that they were creating for all of this new material. But then I think the pandemic really forced the studio's hand, or collective hand, but it's still like, now they're trying to backpedal and they're trying to raise the rates. They're trying to crack down on password sharing. I feel like they have to limit the amount, but it's still like, when you look at shows, and Marvel, I think, is very guilty of this. I think Star Wars as well. Why do you have to have 6 episodes? What if you could tell your story in 3 or 4?
Yeah.
What if you gave showrunners permission to do that and just say, you tell the story as long as you need to? Maybe
or longer. Like do you look at something like Andor, where it's 12 and it had that room to breathe? But
it was also 3-episode chunks, though.
It was, that's a very good point. They were very clear sort of splits.
But Andor was, they were so smart to release all of those episodes at once for the first,
first three, the first block.
Because I remember I watched the first one and I was just like, what the fuck did I just watch? Like, it didn't end on the types of beats you would, think of. It's like ends a shot on him at a fire, but like I kind of got it. Like, it was a slow boil, but there was still, I feel like the first 4 episodes of Ahsoka really could have easily been 1 or 2 and gotten the same point across. Because I feel like when Filoni does a slow boil, it's like, hey, let's just make it more longer and boring.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like it really contributes as much as it could, not in the way that the showrunners and directors of Andor could pull off. But it's still like, why not just do TV movies? Do like a 3-hour movie. You can make it feel bigger. And if you have the story that requires 4 to 6 episodes, then for God's sake, that's great. But
we use it a lot because they've got so much to reference. But look at something like Werewolf by Night. Like, it was an hour long, wasn't it? Ralph, you'll know.
I love
it was what, 45 to an hour long, and it told the story that it was going to tell. It was in, it was out.
I'm in it, sort of.
Yeah, Ralph is an Easter egg in it, and it's like,
oh, you are. Yeah. What? Who are you? What's your Easter egg?
My name is in a headstone in the.
That's
crypt.
great. How did you pull that? Who do you have to kill?
Nobody. I'm friends with
Just had
Michael.
to beat
So-
at Fireball Island every now and then.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Kirk Thatcher, who played like the Scottish Highlander monster hunter. I met him through GalaxyCon, and he's brilliant if you ever get the chance to meet him. I love Werewolf by Night. I'm actually sitting in.
Did you see the colorized version?
Not yet. I need to watch
Okay.
it. I'm
So
actually.
here's, know what's interesting about the colorized version? So they shot it in color.
Yeah.
Digitally. They shot it digitally in color. And then once they decided to go black and white, they took the black and white version and Michael struck a 35 millimeter print of the black and white.
Wow.
So when they went to do the color version, which they had planned on doing before the last version was released, the black and white was released, they just colorized the black and white version instead of doing the
Using
stuff
the
they
original
shot.
color. Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Well, I want
Yeah.
you to do me a favor and seriously
Okay.
pass this on to Michael.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Gray Morrow's work. He co-created Man Thing. I have a Man Thing model kit right up here, but I'm actually sitting in Gray's chair. This was his desk chair. So I did an article on Gray after he died 20 something years ago, and I got to become really good friends with his wife, Poco. And Poco is like an aunt to me. She's very dear. I'd inherited his drawing table as well, which is now in the hands of my friend Jean. I have like an original of Gray's. I have a couple pages. But Poco does not have streaming, and I got teary-eyed with how perfect Man Thing was. Gray is an artist. He is someone who I don't feel has ever gotten enough credit for being like a master. I think it'd be broken into comics 5 years earlier, he would probably be regarded a legend, because he really would have been, like he was up there with Al Williamson and the Easy Crowd. But I sent her, I took like some crappy video with my phone and sent her like a little bit of the Man Thing, and she just like it made her year. In
That's
all
amazing.
seriousness, so please pass that on to him, because
Oh.
and I want to see a fucking Man Thing show. I was so blown away with how great that was. But it was really this great. We got in, we told our story, and we got out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it left you wanting more, which I think is it's kind of like a house guest who doesn't stay too long. And I
It's a
feel like
really
lot
good
of-
one shot.
It's
yeah,
brilliant.
exactly.
It's
But I
brilliant.
feel like a lot of the streaming shows, it gets to the point where it's like, okay.
But we've been saying it for a while. Like, why isn't Lucasfilm doing this? Why aren't they putting out these like hour-long specials where it's just like one story? It doesn't have to do with any of the other stuff that you have to do. Marvel, for me, feels like homework. I'm not watching Loki, and I'm sure that's going to bite me in the ass down the road.
It's okay.
But the thing is, it's like you watch Werewolf by Night. You don't have to know anything.
None of
There's
it.
no homework
quote
involved.
unquote matters, but it
And
matters because it's a good story. It's fun. It's
With
really
Ahsoka,
enjoyable.
there's so much homework with Ahsoka that you have to do.
Well-
That's what I liked about Andor. It doesn't need to be. You don't have to know everything. And I just want like these hour-long. I just want hour-long specials.
But
Maybe
you know
once
what?
every Christmas or
This
once
is-
every May 25th. Like,
Yeah,
May
that's
25th.
but this is the thing, and I think you kind of nailed it. Is, I had this conversation last night with a couple of my students after class. In the 90s, us comic book readers were getting worried about things not being accessible, and the movies have fallen into the exact same trap. But it ultimately comes down to how well you handle backstory. And again, episode 4, like the classic trilogy, was a masterclass in backstory. You got everything you needed to know for where the characters are now. You got enough of a sense of Darth Vader's struggle as Anakin so that you could understand who Darth Vader was. You get a deeper appreciation the more backstory gets provided over time. But they're doing these very... And I think what hurts Marvel is, and even Star Wars to a point, is they're focusing too much on secondary characters. And the secondary characters just aren't, with the exception of like the Mandalorian with Grogu, they're just not I don't feel like they're compelling enough.
They're not
I
fleshed
also-
out enough. Yeah,
I think that Ahsoka needed a better handling of backstory. I enjoyed it, after episode 4 it was over with, and Ray Stevenson was amazing as a conflicted Sith Jedi type, and Sith goth girl Jedi Padawan is, she has a place in my heart at all times. But it's still, it just gets convoluted. And when it gets convoluted, it's preaching to the choir, and you're not getting new people in. And I feel like what's going to happen at some point, I know with the MCU, they're going to have to hit the reset button somehow. They're going to have to reboot it.
Yeah, they're going to have to build to it. We'll see where they go. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean,
they've got loads of, with something like that, with a universe like that, you've got the options to do that. I feel like it's easier to do. I don't want that for Star Wars though. I'd rather it get to a messy place, and then they just tell other stories. Messy plays with the characters that we've seen already, and then just go ignore them anymore, or kill them, and then carry on with someone else.
As much as I love Rey, I'm not interested in the next Rey movie.
I don't think Rey's enough of a character. That's the problem, and I don't think any of them were developed strongly enough. Because all of a sudden, Poe Dameron's Han Solo in Episode 9, who is he really? It's because they were only, I think, thinking about types. I think that Finn was the biggest lost opportunity, because he is the character who had the most to struggle with, clearly.
Especially after watching it this time around.
Yeah.
For me.
God. He had the through line of that movie is him. Yeah.
Yeah, and they dropped the ball on him big time, and John Boyega deserved so much better. Because he doesn't really seem to have too many great things to say about being in those movies, and I don't blame him. But yeah, it's kind of like when you think about types. Okay, we're gonna have kind of a Luke type, but it's gonna be a girl, and it's gonna be Rey. And she has a backstory, and she's kind of mysterious, but we don't really know what the backstory is. So there's no way we can plant seeds or convey her character strongly enough in that, which is why, again, I thought episode 8 was great, because it's like, hey, guess what? You're nothing. And that became Rey having to rise above being told that she's not special, in this kind of very emotionally abusive relationship with Kylo Ren, which, again, there's good stuff in there, but I feel like all the really strong character stuff came from episode 8.
And that's one of the things that kind of bugs me about Star Wars, and I bring this up a lot during the shows, is, the character cameo of the week. You have this galaxy that's endless, and people are running into each other all the time. Everybody is somebody's cousin. Everybody is somebody's, best friend. Yeah. And it's like, no.
I think that's why it was so great with Ray Stevenson's character not being that. He was a Jedi who'd been around during the Clone Wars, but he doesn't need to be someone that Ahsoka knew or anything like that. He's
not Dooku's brother.
Yeah. Or anything.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Ralph, because I was going to choose this moment to say that James and I are long lost siblings. But you ruined the moment. Thanks a lot, man.
It makes everything so small. It makes the galaxy so small. Let's expand it. Let's get into stuff that let's get some Werewolf by Nights in there.
Yeah, well, there's a great thing. Alex Ross years ago, I was interviewing him for Graphic NYC, and we got to talking about Spider-Man 2, which he hates. And the thing with Alex, if you ever meet him, is Alex is very emphatic about whether he likes something or not. That's just who he is, and he's such a delight. I just love the guy. But I love Spider-Man 2. He hated it. But one of the things that he kind of brought up, which I do agree with.
That's the one with his artwork in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was just kind of like, why can't bad guys just be some asshole who shows up? you know, and he's absolutely right. Like that's you know, we just watched.
That's what Darth Vader was.
Yeah. We watched The Dark Knight in my Batman class, and you know, Joker's great because he's an asshole who just shows up.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't need to see his origin. You don't, you know, but
he's
there's
chaos
this,
incarnate. Like, yeah.
But
It's kind of what I like about the James Bond movies.
Yeah, and when they start,
Not a lot
you
of
know,
tormented souls.
But I think what hurt Spectre, I don't like Spectre at all.
No.
And a lot of it is that they had to force Blofeld into being someone who had this personal connection to James Bond.
I have a headcanon on that. I feel that it's been established that Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever can alter his face and alter other people's face. Gustav Graves was able to, in Die Another Day, alter his DNA to change his race and make him a completely different person. I feel like in this world of 007, that Franz Oberhauser, the man that grew up as essentially a stepbrother with James Bond, was not Blofeld. Blofeld was a man who altered his DNA and face to look like James Bond's stepbrother, so just to get in his head more. That's
like the
so,
Batman.
That's
I
great.
guess.
You know what? I think my favorite.
But that's me because I don't like that either. But I'm like, hey, listen, it's established in this world that people can do crazy stuff with their bodies.
There's a funny thing I was saying with Michael, because I did ask him a little James Bond, because I got his ear for, you know.
I mean, you're talking to Michael Wilson,
Yeah, I was just like, I had just seen No Time to Die, which I actually really loved.
I love that movie. I thought it was good.
And I love how it ended. And I was just kind of, you know, spoilers for this, so mute this if, you know, but you know, it's just kind of like, I'm just really curious where you guys are going to go. I mean, are you going to recast it, or are you going to just start over again with a younger actor, because it has a very definite end?
I mean, James Bond dies in it. We'll just tell people James Bond dies at the end of No Time to Die.
Been out for long enough. He's on Prime.
And then Michael was just gonna laugh. He's like, "That's a great question." He's like, "I don't know the answer yet." You know?
Right.
That's great.
And he was,
but it's the perfect place to just go back to basics and just do one and done movies. The continuity doesn't matter. You can have an actor play an ally in one movie, and then 2 movies later, he's a bad guy. Like that's happened a bunch.
My favorite is he's not my favorite Bond, but my favorite movie is On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
He's my second favorite Bond, and that's my favorite James Bond movie.
Yeah, good man. And Telly Savalas is, I think, my favorite Blofeld, because he's a Blofeld who kicks ass. Like, he's dangerous. You look at his Blofeld, and it's like, oh, shit's gonna get real. You look at the other guys, he's kind of pasty. He's kind of, you know, he's not gonna last in a fight. But Savalas was so dangerous, and that was such a delightful movie. It has the best music, best cinematography, best Bond girl, Diana Rigg. You know, it's just such a great, and people shit on it because it's George Lazenby. It was okay as Bond. I mean, it wasn't awful.
His portrayal of Bond reminded me more of the books than Connery did.
Yeah. Well, you know who I know is Gerard Christopher. Do you know the Superboy TV show from the early 90s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, they're really great. Like, the last 2 seasons are phenomenal. Like, surprisingly good. You know, production's a little hinky. It was a low budget. For those of you who don't know, it was a syndicated show, and it had a low budget, but it was early, like, digital and video editing and effects. But Lazenby played Jor-El in an episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Gerard was telling me that, like, he was just great on set. Like, he was so much fun. He was funny. He was charming. He was fun. Everything you kind of want to believe that George Lazenby was in real life.
He used to live not too far from where I am in Southampton. He lived, like, at the bottom of the M3, which is, like, just as you're heading out of town. He had a big house there.
I would love to meet him.
I don't think he's there anymore.
Yeah, Gerard had said good things about him, and Gerard's really cool too. He's like 2 hours for me, so it's I'm hoping to see him again soon. But
Stevie mentioned that I said that Dalton was my second favorite, not Lazenby, and I just want to say it fluctuates. It's constant. It's in constant flux. It's in constant flux.
Now, if you guys ever have like more than one kid, then you might be in trouble. Okay. my dad once was. I come from one of 4, and my dad was like, "I love you so much, Sean," and I'm like, "What the fuck?"
Mean.
Dad. It's like, okay. Sorry.
We talked about getting in and getting out and not overstaying our welcome, and I think
you guys,
we've got an hour and 40 minutes here.
It's a long one.
It's a long one, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really interesting. Like, we've talked about everything, like not just the Force Awakens.
Yeah. I go off topic. I should.
No, it's good. It's made for a really interesting conversation. So thank you for joining us, Christopher.
Sure thing.
I mean, anyone who's going to bring up James Bond, Green Lantern,
yeah, like you're right in Ralph's wheelhouse. Well, 100%.
Dude, I'm doing my dissertation on Superman right now, so I'm happy to talk about that stuff anytime.
Don't say that. Ralph's going to have you back on one of his Patreon shows in a week's time.
There's a friend of mine, Brian O'Halloran from he was Dante in Clerks.
Yeah.
And when he learned I was a professor, of this stuff, he's like, "Man, that's a racket. Have they figured it out yet?" I'm like, "No, they're still paying you and have benefits." Like, yeah, it's a pretty good racket to be part of. I do want to share one thing with you guys before you go.
Cool.
I have my Yoda hand puppet.
Oh, that's amazing.
Looks better than the episode 1 puppet.
It does look better than the episode 1 puppet. And
yes, she looked.
Like this is
here, bitch.
Look at his hair.
that hairline is amazing. But also, like, you've got the motion of his head right. Like, that's amazing.
I'm also a client. Yes. Also client I am.
What do you think of the puppet in The Last Jedi?
Oh,
It seemed a little squishy. Oh my
don't
god.
shit on puppet.
Okay.
I love it. It was the original molds that they worked off of. And I gotta tell you, man, that got me into feels. And I love the concept of Yoda coming back with the express intent of fucking with Luke. That's it.
Right.
It's
Fucking with Luke.
But Yoda, where he's just a little troll, but like not in that way.
Oh, I love Yoda so much.
Yeah.
No, I that nails me still. And Episode 8 is the only one of those sequels that I think is really worth studying. In all honesty, because
the line of we are what they grow beyond is such a great line, and it's so usable. I mean, for you as a teacher and as a father, like, it must be just something that sits with you. Yeah,
it does, but also it's like that's the first one. Okay, I feel like Episode 9 is very much, and even Episode 7, it's like this very orchestrated, planned, this is the moment where we're going to get your emotions.
Yeah.
But Episode 8, because you don't see, it feels more sincere. Ryan Johnson's apparently an enormous Star Wars fan.
Oh, yeah.
I love that movie in a lot of ways. I mean, there's stuff about it where it maybe went a little more science fiction than space fantasy that I felt was a disconnect. But by and large, at its core, he had something to say with it, which you can't say with much other Star Wars media today. But yeah, I just, it's kind of like when I saw Avengers Endgame, there was a 13-year-old girl sitting next to me, and you could see kind of like, when they're going to kill characters, and it's like, this is the emotional moment because it's just telegraphed. And she was doing the whole, like, when they killed Loki, she was like,
right.
Loki just didn't even notice her being like upset over it. And I felt like that's how it kind of 7 and 9, especially 9, made me feel. But 8, I mean, no, I cried my eyes out through that movie. It was amazing. Yeah.
We're going to talk about it somewhat in 2 weeks. We're going to be covering The Director and the Jedi which I think I'm more interested in watching that now than ever.
I'm looking forward to it.
especially
I haven't
with-
watched it since the first time that it came out on digital and stuff. That was when I watched
Oh, was that an extra on the DVD or
Yeah.
on the DVD and the
It's
digital
on-
release. It's on Disney Plus.
It might
I
be
think.
on Disney Plus,
Should be.
but
I'll
yeah,
have to watch
it's the
it.
making of The Last Jedi, and it's all about sort of Rian Johnson and him. Like the main crux of it is him trying to convince Mark Hamill, like, "Hey, this is the way to go."
Wow.
It's really good, and it'll get us some Last Jedi talk without having to
That's great.
to
Yeah, I'll have to
pull the
watch
trigger
that
on our
when
Last
I have
Jedi
time.
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Do you have any
thank you so
plugs?
much.
ChristopherIrving.com.
Yeah, ChristopherIrving.com. Snap City Swag is my Instagram for my projects. It's been pretty quiet for a while, but because I've just been busy. But I also do pulp novels and trading cards for a toy line called Eagle Force, which is like G.I. Joe. So Snap City Swag on Instagram is the best way. I'm no longer on Twitter because Twitter's evil. I'm
You're on Blue Sky.
Yeah,
Hey,
That's
Blue
how
Sky's great.
that's how we found each other.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I'm on Blue Sky. The Star Wars store at Regency Square Mall in Richmond, Virginia. Totally worth
If I'm
going.
out there, I'm gonna go.
I'm trying to tell everyone because its business has been a little slow. I think it's because of the mall itself. It's kind of a dead mall. But yeah, otherwise I'm doing my dissertation on Superman. My book Cliffhanger about movie serials of the 40s with superheroes is almost sold out.
Is Captain Marvel the still the best superhero
wow.
serial?
I love Spy Smasher.
Okay, I'll have to
Actually,
watch that one.
Spy Smasher is amazing. The Fawcett ones, Captain Marvel and Spy Smasher, are great. Captain America is actually a way better serial than you would think it'd be because it's a really shitty Captain America. But there are Dale Van Sickle's stunts are great. The cinematography is amazing in it. The final fight is just like if you let yourself sit down and watch it from a film studies perspective, it's amazing. But if you watch as a Captain America fan, where the guy who plays Captain America is kind of pudgy and has a Jersey accent and it's not so good. But the stunt Republican stunt people. So that's on sale at twomaros.com. That's TWO maros.com. But yeah, otherwise I'm here, always teaching, always talking, never taking a break. But
and we never take a break either. We're here every week. Next week we will have. Are we doing a data link next week, Ralph?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have anything planned, but presumably we'll be back next week. If not, we will be back in 2 weeks with the director and the Jedi. And yeah, you can find us on Blue Sky and Instagram, I guess, but mostly Blue Sky is where to find us these days.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for everybody for joining in the chat. And yeah, it's been a blast.
It has. It's been a really great conversation. So until next week or next time, don't give in to hate.
Celebrate the love.
punch it.